Whispers from Below, a horror podcast by Justin W. Geis. Scary stories, both real and fake. Hello, listeners. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 12 of Whispers from Below, a podcast by a madman for madmen. I'm your resident psychopath, Justin W. Geis, and today's topic of discussion is Deadman Wonderland. Now, I have a couple things to talk about before we get right into the episode, and I'll probably bring them back up at the end because they're very exciting. First of all, if you have not checked out the Instagram page yet, at Whispers from Below, no spaces, no underscores, no capitals, no nothing, you'll see that I have some merch prototypes that are up there. I have a hat and a notebook right now. There's more stuff on the way. Let me know if you guys would be interested in purchasing any of that, and I might be able to start some pre-orders pretty soon for stuff like that. I just have a couple more things to design. There's a hoodie, there's a sweatshirt, there's a t-shirt, there's tons of stuff coming. So let me know if you guys are interested in that. The other thing is that I have decided to start uploading 2 episodes a week. So we are going to have one episode that's going to go up at the normal time, Monday, 8 a.m. Eastern. And then we are going to have an episode that's uploaded on Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern time. I decided to do this because I don't have a ton going on right now, and I want to get a lot more content out there for you. I know that stuff like this is really helping people get through quarantine and all the hard times that are going on right now, especially being stuck inside. So if there's anything that I can do, it would be this. This is pretty much all I can do right now. So I'm going to start releasing 2 episodes a week. It'll go up Thursdays and Mondays, same time, 8 a.m. And yeah, without further ado, let's get right into this one. This is going to be a relatively okay episode, I think, for the most part, for a younger listener. I will say that if you are going to actually go watch this anime, please be a little bit older. What I'm going to talk about in here is not as dark as the anime gets. I'm giving a brief overview because I don't want to spoil anything. But what I will say, there are minor spoilers for the anime. And secondly, the language that is used in this anime is very adult and it's very jarring, especially if you're watching the dubbed version versus the subbed. So if you're watching English people over it, the language is a lot more jarring than it is when you watch the subtitles. But even the subtitles can get really dark and aggressive. So just as a note, if you're going to watch the anime, please make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into. But this episode should be okay to listen to because I'm not really getting into a whole lot about that. So Deadman Wonderland, as I said before, is a manga/anime. It is a Japanese manga series, and it was written by Jinsei Kataoka. I'm so sorry if I'm saying anything wrong. I'm really trying my best. It's illustrated by Kazuma Kondao, and the anime was adapted for release in April of 2011, and it was released on July 2011. It only used the first 21 chapters from the manga for the content. It got licensed by Funimation, and it started airing on Adult Swim's Toonami block, if y'all recall that. I don't know if they still do that, honestly, but I remember the Toonami block. I loved watching stuff on that with my my siblings. And the premise of it is a little... You might be wondering, Justin, you're going to talk about an anime. Anime is about fantasy and, high school girls with their skirts up and blah, 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 blah. And there are animes that are, fully like that. If you're into stuff like that, I can give you a ton of recommendations. I love anime. I can tell you all about it. This one is not like that. This is one of my favorite animes ever because it's so different and dark, but it's still super anime in the way that it's presented and the way that some of the fight scenes are done and the way that the battles are done, the sequences, the art style. Still very Japanese, still very anime traditional, but the plot is like super fascinating. So the plot, it opens with this huge earthquake that kind of like ravages Japan, because I don't know if you know, but in real life Japan is on these little plates. Oh my god, I cannot remember what they're called. These little plates underneath the ground, and so a lot of earthquakes and tsunamis and stuff happen in Japan because the earth underneath it is so unsettled all the time because it's tectonic, right? Tectonic plates, that sounds correct. It's underneath all the tectonic plates. That sounds like something that is correct. So it's underneath all of those, or it's above all of those, and so there's this big earthquake that happens, which is really not far from the truth. That happens all the time. And then it kind of sinks like a 3/4 of Japan into the ocean, and it kind of like ruins the city. Then it cuts to 10 years, and we meet Ganta Igarashi, who is our sort of protagonist. He's our person that we follow through the anime. He is just a normal middle schooler, and in proper Japanese style, he's in middle school. They love making people like 13 years old, like right when they're hitting that sort of like puberty where they're starting to come into their own and kind of become more adult. They love putting people in that scenario. He is so young. He was technically a survivor of the earthquake, but like he doesn't really remember. It's sort of like being alive when 9/11 happened, but you were like 2 years old. Like you were alive and you were present, but you don't actually remember anything that happened. Because I'm one of those people. So, you know, you kind of, you know that it was there, but you really don't remember anything about it. Then suddenly this crimson armored man who's like covered in blood, they call him the Red Man in the anime. He like murders his entire class, but instead of murdering Ganta, he throws this like red crystal that slides into his chest, and he kind of like passes out. When he wakes up, the whole class, it looks like a bomb went off. The whole class is dead. It's super bloody. It's super grotesque. And he gets called into court. He ends up getting sentenced to death, and he goes to Deadman Wonderland. Now, Deadman Wonderland is a prison that is also an amusement park, which is important to note. But the reason that it's this way, we'll get into a little bit later, but it's to earn money to kind of help Tokyo rebuild. That's part of the reason why it's such a big attraction. Once he gets there, he gets a collar that sort of monitors his location and his vitals, and it gives slight lethal injections, a slow like drip almost of poison through his neck. So every 3 days, he has to eat this really nasty tasting medicine that they call candy. And if he doesn't eat the candy, which is like an antidote, then the injection will take over and he will die after 3 days. So you can obtain this candy. He finds out that you can obtain the candy through a couple different things. There are a bunch of prison events. So you can like perform for audiences. You can start working backstage, or you can buy it with cast points. And cast points are sort of this currency that's created for the inmates. You can only get cast points though through like super dangerous games. One thing to note is that the audience that is watching does not realize that the games are actually dangerous. They don't realize that it's not an act. So when somebody gets impaled, or like when somebody falls off and gets hurt, they don't think it's real. They think that it's all part of the like sort of Disney World atmosphere sort of thing. So they can only participate in the most dangerous games in order to get the cast points. But the cast points can really get you like a lot of things. Like they can get you like furniture, you can get better food, you can buy years off of your sentence, you can get candy, if you're a death row inmate, like stuff like that. You can buy a ton of stuff with it. Then you meet Shiro. She is this super kawaii albino girl that kind of like assists Ganta, and she claims that she knows him. They've been friends, and he's like, I don't remember you. And I'm not going to give any spoilers, but she is a very interesting character in that you don't really know a lot about her, and that's kind of the point. You're supposed to not know a whole lot about her. She's also kind of there to be a little bit of sex appeal. Every anime has that one character that's like either scantily clad or in like really skin tight clothing. That's Shiro, but she's also adorable, so you kind of accept the fact that she's like a little weirdly sexual. There's always one character, you gotta get used to it. The prisoners also don't know who Shiro is, so that's the other thing to keep in mind. She like kind of lives in the prison, but like doesn't know any of the prisoners and is not a prisoner. Ganta becomes very intent on finding the Red Man because he wants to save himself and sort of lower his sentence, because he's like, I don't belong here, I didn't do it, and nobody believes him. He starts to realize, this is a spoiler, so I'm so sorry for those of you that want to watch this anime, but this is part of the setup and it's very important. He starts to realize that he can manipulate his own blood. So he can sort of manipulate it, almost like if you've watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's like a water bender. He can like sort of create his blood into like little bullets. This is called they're called the branches of sin. His specific branch of sin we'll talk about a little bit later. I'm about to get into that. But the branches of sin are this magical ability where you can kind of control your blood and you get a weapon. Now, every branch of sin is completely different, and you will not have the same branch of sin as somebody else. So people with this ability in the prison are known as dead men. they are all prisoners at Deadman Wonderland. And once his ability is discovered, he is sent to compete in these like underground sort of fighting rings where a bunch of rich people pay to watch, and it's called Carnival Corpse. These anonymous spectators pay like a ton of money to watch people fight. It's kind of like watching like a dog fight or something like that, but it's with these people, these dead men. Some of the branches of sin powers, I wanted to talk about this because I think that they're all really cool, and the way that they're animated, they get into it a lot more in the manga because they have a little bit more time to sort of delve into like what each person has for their branches of sin. But one thing to note is that a lot of things in this anime are a reference to birds. I don't really remember fully why they reference birds so much, but like Carnival Corpse is like a big bird thing. Like everybody has a bird name. Like it's like hummingbird, woodpecker, crow, like all these little names of birds. The wheel that they spin later, it's a bird. Like for some reason, Deadman Wonderland is like all about birds. I don't really remember why, but that's part of it. So the first branch of sin is the Ganta gun. He can create bullets that are made of his blood that he can then fire. But what's really interesting to note is that they don't let that be fantasy in the sense of like he keeps firing bullets and is totally fine. He gets like anemic. Like in one of the first fights, he starts firing all these bullets and he's like, I need more power. So he keeps drawing blood. The other thing is you have to draw blood to use the blood. So like he bites like part of his finger to like draw blood. Other people, like this one girl who has like whips, she like pulls earrings out that cut her. Other people just use like a knife. Like you have to get blood going in order to be able to use it. And he starts firing the blood and then gets super dizzy and lightheaded. And they're like, did you think, like, it's blood? Like, what did you think was going to happen? You know, which is really interesting because a lot of animes will give people blood powers and then not talk about how it would affect you if it was like a real life thing. And I feel like this anime really takes it to the next level of being like, yeah, you can't use it all the time. Like there's a fight where he's like, damn, I should have eaten before this. Like you can tell that he's like losing blood fat, you know, stuff like that. It's really interesting. So he has little bullets. That's our main character's thing. The crow claw, which are these scythes that can emerge from any part of the body, but he usually has them come from his forearms. They can also reach a really long length. But normally they're just like little scythes that come out of his forearms. Another one is called the owl's eyeball. He can make bombs of blood that float freely and can be triggered on command. So he sort of sends out these little balls of blood, and if you come near them, he can trigger them to explode. There's Condor Candle, which is blood that can be set on fire on command. So he can like spread his blood out and then light it on fire. There are other ones, like those are just a couple examples that had really cool names, but some of the other ones are like whips. They can set up bramble traps. This one girl can make like huge fists, like Hulk fists of her blood that are like super strong and hard and you can't break them. One of the main ones that the red man has is like these hexagonal like wires that sort of pop out. And he can like slice through anything. There's so much more. If you look it up, Branches of Sin, it's really interesting to read all of them. I also just like, I love the idea of being able to sort of use your own blood as a weapon. I think that that's really fascinating, which is part of the reason why I fell in love with this anime. I just think that it was so creative to sort of use that idea, but then make it realistic. And like, you can't continually not, like you can't shoot a bunch of blood bullets and then be fine. Like you're going to get anemic. And so you have to use strategy in order for your branch of sin to make sense. You know, it was just interesting to note. So now we're going to get into a little bit of like how the prison is sort of run, which is really sketchball change. So the prison itself is set up like Disneyland. It's like an amusement park. There's shows, there's rides, there's, you know, merchandise you can buy, all sorts of stuff. And this is a privately owned prison that raises money to rebuild the city of Tokyo after the earthquake, which is why it's such a big attraction, because they thought if we can use prisoners to bring in money, we can create a prison and an amusement park. This is going to get money for us to keep our prisoners and also to help, you know, build Tokyo up. And then they're getting rehabilitated by working in an amusement park. Like it was like a whole business scheme that people really adore, which is why people keep coming. And I mentioned it before, but the audiences don't really know that the games are actually harming contestants. They don't know that the contestants are actually getting hurt. And they also don't realize that like the prison itself is super aggressive. Like capital punishment is like so normal in there. They beat up prisoners all the time. It's really just like not chill. Like the constant abuse from guards is like very constant. the collars that each prisoner wears, every prisoner has one, not just the death row inmates. The death row inmates, it slowly injects poison into them. But otherwise, if you're just a prisoner, the collar kind of keeps you in check. It maintains your health. It keeps tabs on you. It makes sure that they know where you are, what your life is like. Life in the sense of like how your heartbeat's doing, your vitals, stuff like that. These collars can only unlock after you die or by key cards that some of the guards have. So if you manage to get your collar off by beating up a guard, you'd have to beat up a very specific guard, but you could probably do it. But normally the collar will unlock after you die, and there's no real other way to get it off. Again, for the death row inmates, you have to consume the antidote every 3 days, which is in the form of this little like candy that you got to eat. And they don't really provide it for you. I think in the anime they give him like 1 dose right away. And then they say you got to find it in 3 days or you're dead, which I think this sounds weird, but I think that this is a really interesting way of doing death row. I know it's not actually that possible to sort of manage that, but I think it's fascinating because then when the person is done and they give up, they can die on their own terms versus kind of getting a date of like, this is when you have to die. It's like, if you don't manage to keep yourself alive, then you don't stay alive, which I think, it's like survival of the fittest at that point in prison, which I think it kind of already is. So it's a fascinating way to kind of go about that. Like I mentioned before, the cast points can buy you like, I wrote prisoners can use cast points to buy a shit ton of things. You can buy furniture for your cell. You can buy yourself a bigger cell. You can buy yourself regular food. You can get years off of your sentence. You can buy candy for your death row inmates. The only thing you can't buy with cast points is you cannot buy freedom if you are a dead man. It's the only thing you can't do. If they know that you're a dead man, you cannot buy your own freedom. And then we get into the sort of grungy part of the prison, which is this underground facility where they hold all the dead men and where they hold Carnival Corpse, and it's called the G Block. Carnival Corpse is this huge arena. I think in the first fight that Ganta participates in with Crow, there are trees that he kind of climbs up, and then in the other fights there's not. Some of the fights there's stuff there, sometimes there's not. It depends on the fight. And the way that they set it up is it's this big ring. There's a big bird on a nest thing at the top of the arena, way high up. That's kind of the announcer. And then surrounding the ring are these like online personas that are all watching, and you hear them commenting stuff the whole time. It's really interesting the way that they do the fights. It feels very like when you're on like the dark web. Not that I've ever been government, because I know you listened to this after I said I was like basically a serial killer. But sort of the things that I've heard about like when you're on the dark web and you're watching like a snuff film and stuff like that. It seems very similar to that sort of vibe. There's like a Criminal Minds episode about stuff like that. Check it out. But the den men are kind of kept separated in that G Block. They want to make sure that they're not with the other prisoners. They don't want their powers getting out, number one. And number two, they don't really want them getting hurt because they need them to make as much money as they do in Carnival Corpse. So also in G Block, there is the really fun notion of these scientists that sort of experiment on humans. So sometimes they use prisoners. A lot of times they use the people that are in G Block. They'll use a lot of the dead men. Most of what they're doing Carnival Corpse for is for monetary gain, and a lot of it also is for political gain, because they know that if they're kind of holding these mutants captive, that at any point they could release them, which kind of gives them a hand up on certain situations. You can imagine it's like saying like, I have a nuclear bomb, like why don't you do a deal with me? It's like, okay, well now I feel like I have to do a deal with you because you have a nuclear bomb, What happens if you are a dead man when you lose the Carnival Corpse? A lot of times you die. So if you lose Carnival Corpse, you either pass out or you die. If you die, good for you. You've kind of escaped. If you survive, you have part of your anatomy surgically removed for experimentation. They do this by spinning this little bird-shaped slot machine to determine which body part is removed. And that is broadcasted to prisoners in Deadman Wonderland. So the prisoners can watch what body part is going to get removed. Body parts that have been removed prior to our time on the show that we know about are eyeballs, kidneys, all of your hair, part of your stomach, and even vocal cords. One girl gets her I think it's a girl, gets her vocal cords removed, which is like super duper dope, right? Super duper cool. Um, like I said, it's kind of a dark anime, but in sort of a brighter style, which is interesting. None of the visuals are as dark as like if you watch a Death Note, a lot of the coloring and the tone of the anime is very dark, and they make that translate in how it's animated and how it's directed. But in this one, it's almost drawn, it's drawn very similar to like if you've watched like Sword Art Online or Soul Eater. It has that sort of like whimsical style in it, but then it's like this really dark, terrible premise. It's really fascinating to sort of watch, and I think they did that on purpose. I personally believe that they did that on purpose so that they could get this idea of like, this is what the carnival, or this is what, you know, Deadman Wonderland appears to be on the outside, but at its core, it's this dark, terrible thing. But by making the art style brighter, it sort of gets that point across more of like, people don't really know what's going on. I think it was a smart choice. Other people disagree. It only had one season, so the season had high reviews, but it only had one season. So like, I can't really say much, you know? So the winner of Carnival Corpse, I just got so off track. The winner of Carnival Corpse is awarded cast points. They get candy to save themselves because most of the Carnival Corpse people are on death row. And you can also get a bunch of other prizes, but you get like a ton of cast points. Like, it's really worth it to try and win. They try to make it worth your while because they realize that you are having to almost kill somebody and you're having to fight in these brutal games. So they try to make it worth your while. And that's pretty much the basic premise. I don't want to get too much into the nitty-gritty of the plot. What I will say is, yet again, if you are a younger listener that is listening, or you are someone that doesn't do well with blood, number one, if you don't do well with blood, this is not your anime. Number two, if you don't do well with certain dicey topics, there's a couple stories that are shared on the anime about sexual assault and abuse and things like that. Just keep in mind that it is meant to be more of an adult anime. It's kind of dark. I know that it's, like I say, like a younger listener could listen to this episode and be okay, because I don't think that anything I said was super grotesque or terrible. It's stuff that you see in like Call of Duty anyway. But the anime itself has some language that is really, really dark and really, really aggressive, especially if you watch the dubbed version. So for those of you that don't watch anime, there is an English dub version and there is a Japanese subtitle version. I always prefer to watch the subtitles for the most part because I like seeing the anime done in its original language and then watching the subtitles and reading along, because I think it flows better that way. But there are a lot of people that like to watch the dubbing of it, which is like the English translation of it, basically, so that they don't have to read along. The English dub can get very aggressive. It is a very aggressive anime. There's a lot of language at one point that you're like, wow, they just said so many words that are not acceptable, like all in a row. So just keep that in mind. I would say it's definitely an anime to watch when you're older. But keep it in mind. I mean, it is one of my favorite animes. I've watched it 3 or 4 times now. I absolutely love it. It's one season. It's like 12 episodes. It's not long. It doesn't take you that, like, you could binge it all in one day if you really tried. But it's great. I love it. I love the art style. I love the premise. I just wish it would have gotten a little bit more time on air. I wish it would have gotten a second season. The end of the first season is kind of like a big cliffhanger, and you really want to know what happens next. And then nothing happens next. So, it's kind of sad because it's one of those where like it ends and you're wondering, oh, what's gonna happen next? And then you Google like, when is season 2 coming out? And it's like never, and you're like, oh no. But it's really great. I would say that it's definitely something that you should watch. If you look up reviews of it, it has mostly positive reviews, but there's not a lot of reviews on it. It has a really dedicated fan base. I'm one of these people. I love this anime. Every time somebody asks me like, what are your favorite animes? Like, I'll say like Death Note because duh, everybody loves Death Note. Sword Art Online, again, duh, most people really love that anime. My Hero Academia, yeah, most people love that anime. But then I always say Deadman Wonderland and they look at me like, I don't know that one. And I'm like, well, Let me tell you all about it. I've been looking forward to doing this episode. This is one of the first ideas for an episode that I had. And then I was trying to catch up with starting mini series in my podcast, like, the Grimm's Fairy Tale one, trying to get a bunch of location ones in there, serial killer ones. That way I can start more topics for everybody. But I've been really meaning to do an anime episode, and this was really fun to do. Another thing to note is that I think this is really interesting, and I'm not entirely sure if this is true, but also it doesn't sound too far off. The Chinese government banned Deadman Wonderland and 38 other animes and manga from being viewed or read in the country because it was like unclean or whatever. And this happened on June 12th, 2015. Again, I read this on the internet and I read it a couple times, which leads me to believe that it is true. But again, it's the internet and you can't really take everything that you hear from the internet to be completely factual. But if you find something that says that it's not true, like, please let me know, because I don't want to be giving you guys false information. But like, look it up. Like, I'm pretty sure this is real, and I think that that's very fascinating because it is. I mean, I understand exactly why. Like, I was watching one of the fight scenes yesterday, and this girl looks so cute and then just starts saying things, and you're like, oh my god. Like, I turned down my phone, I put my headphones in, I was like, I'm in a house full of people and I don't think anybody wants to be hearing this but me. Like, it's like, it gets very aggressive. And another fun little fact to note is for those of you that are gamers like myself, if you've ever played Lollipop Chainsaw, I have personally not, but I know a lot of people love that game. Shiro's costume is actually unlockable in Lollipop Chainsaw, so you can look exactly like Shiro. And I looked up pictures of it, and it's super duper cute. Like, she looks really cute in the Shiro costume. So look it up. Shiro's costume is super cool. She's albino. She's got this white hair and then this like white bodysuit with all these red markings on it. It's really, really dope. And it translated really well to like a video game format as well. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much all I have to talk about today, regarding Deadman Wonderland. It is one of my favorite animes. I've said that like 8 times, but I really, truly love this anime and I recommend that you watch it. I am going to give a disclaimer that it's dark and it's gritty and there's a lot of topics in it sometimes that make you uncomfortable, but the concept of it and the way that it's done is so well done, and yet it feels so innovative and yet so nostalgic at the same time, because you still get that like anime moment where like they're lying in a pool of their blood and they stand up and they're like, I don't want to die, and then they like fight someone and then they win even though they should have lost against all odds. Like, it still has that like very anime sort of style, sort of anime sensitivity is probably not the right word to it, but it still has that like innovation, that differentness that sort of makes you want to keep watching. Like, the plot gets very involved very quickly. It escalates really fast and you're kind of like, how did we get here? Who is this person? And yeah, it's really fascinating. You should definitely take a look. Even if you don't take a look at the anime and you're into the sort of idea of branches of sin, if you Google branches of sin, it comes up. There's a whole Deadman Wonderland like wiki fan page, and you can look up all the different branches of sin. Even if you're not going to watch the whole anime, just watch some of the fight scenes. The idea of Carnival Corpse is super duper dope, and watching everybody use their branches of sin is like really cool. Like, it sounds like it might be kind of like boring anime stuff, but the way that it's done is so clever. It's really something to behold and to love. That's it for Deadman Wonderland. I'm going to stop repping it so hard, but truly, honestly, give it a watch, give it a listen, give it a viewing, give it whatever you want, give it some love. It really deserves it. As far as everything else goes, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, I'm going to start doing 2 episodes a week. So look out for an episode on Thursdays and Mondays now. That way you'll have an episode that'll take you through the weekend, and then you'll have an episode that'll take you through the week. Let me know if the Thursday slot is weird. I can also move it to Friday. I can try to make it sooner in the week. I can try to make it later. Just let me know what you guys think. I thought that Thursday was a nice in between, because then you can have it for the weekend, and then you can have Monday for the beginning part of the week. If this schedule is not what you're into, let me know, and then we don't have to do it. But this is the schedule that I think worked best in my brain. As far as the merch goes, I'm not really going to be selling a lot of it yet. We're doing a ton of prototypes. I'm going to send it to some friends and some family once I get all of it designed and ordered and figured out. And then hopefully you'll start seeing more of that on social media. I'll try to repost it as much as possible. If you have any questions or comments, please send me an email at whispersfrombelow@gmail.com. No spaces, no underscores, no capitals, no nothing. Or send me a direct message on Instagram. We are at Whispers From Below. No spaces, no underscores, no capitals, no nothing. I try to post on there a lot more frequently lately. I'm starting to do promotional stuff for it. I'm really trying to make this take off. I started this podcast as sort of a way to talk about topics that I really liked and sort of make it a fun little hobby for me, and I wasn't as concerned with who was listening to it. But I'm starting to really love doing this every week. I love talking to you guys. I love talking about these topics. I love researching it. I love getting it out there. So please, if there's one thing that I can ask of you guys besides listening to this and supporting me, it's sharing it. I know that that's like everybody asks you, like you watch a YouTube video and they're like, please share this video. Like I'm really passionate. And you're like, I don't get it, but now I get it. If you guys could just share it, even with just like one or two friends, you don't need to share it on your social media necessarily unless you really love it. And then please do. But even if you don't want to share it, completely on your social media, just with one or two friends, bring it up, mention it, make them take a listen. Just anything, because the more views that I can get from this, the more listens I can get, the more downloads I can get, the more content I can get for you guys, the more merch I can create for you guys, the bigger my social media stuff can get. I can start doing, I have some really big ideas as far as the YouTube channel goes. It's at Whispers From Below. No spaces, no underscores, no capitals, no nothing. I have a lot of ideas for videos that I would love to do on that channel, but I'm not going to start a ton of that yet until I know that I have a really dedicated fan base. And right now it's getting bigger. Quarantine is a great time for this. I feel like a lot of people are looking for something to listen to. So please, 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 if you have a friend that you would think would like this, or if you know someone that won't, but they might have a friend that would like it, please share it with them. If you are bold enough, please share this on social media. I would absolutely love to get more people to listen to this podcast. And really, it benefits all of us. If you really love this podcast and you really want it to continue, then the best possible thing for you to do is to listen to it yourself and then share it with some friends that would also love it. Because finding like-minded people is really hard nowadays. And I think it's really nice when a group of people can all come together and kind of talk about one thing that they like. So remember, Deadman Wonderland is dope as hell. You can get anemic if you lose a lot of your blood, and wash your hands. I know I keep saying that one, but continue to wash your hands because you're filthy and gross and you know it.